Linda, thanks for sharing with
Mhm.
us. You wanted to share a little bit about how love has
Mhm.
shaped your relationship with the Lord and in your life, and thought maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about how love and your relationship with God showed up in your early life growing up.
Okay, and thanks for letting me do this. I grew up in a very loving family um, in the 50s when family life was viewed as almost perfect. We lived in a neighborhood where everyone was about the same after my dad came back several years afterwards from being in World War II. He was a member of the greatest generation. And we grew up in a small town. It was just my sister and I. So my dad had three women to watch over and take care of, and he did a wonderful job of that. I grew up in a home that was somewhat affluent. We were not actually very wealthy, but we did have some measure of wealth. And for instance, if there were four drivers in the family, then there were always four nice cars in the driveway. And my mom and dad were very wise about teaching us what it meant to have some wealth and to have the freedom and the privileges that it gave to us. For instance, um, I know today a lot of my friends buy their children cars when they graduate from high school or college. But my dad always made sure we understood that the car that was, for instance, mine in the driveway, was not my car. I was borrowing it from him. And so I feel that my parents were very balanced in all the things they taught us. And in the early years, until I was about 7, my dad was not a baptized Christian. He had grown up in another church different than my mother's. And eventually, by the time I was in high school, Dad had grown spiritually. He had become a deacon in the church. And I recall how wonderful it was to see him in a chair with his Bible open on his lap, because very early on we didn't see that with Dad. He was one of those dads who went to church with us every Sunday. The four of us always went together as a family, and that was really a wonderful experience. Um, my dad and my mother taught us a lot of important life values, like um, mother and dad grew up during the Depression, and because of that, my dad, who was pretty highly intelligent, did not see through his dream of being a college graduate and the first in his family. Instead, he had to work. And so he and mother sacrificed a lot to be sure that when the time came, I would be able to go to college. And this also was an important mark on my faith in the Lord, because that's how I went to college, because of how hard my mom and dad worked to be sure I would be the first person in the family who would go to college. And once a month, he would call my mother and say, "Bring Linda down. I've got the sack full." And the sack would be silver dollars, which people used back in the 50s. And Dad and I would walk hand in hand to the savings and loan right down the street so he could deposit those. And he would talk to me the whole way about how important it would be that I go to college. And he would say, "Do you know what this sack of money is for?" And I would answer, "Well, yes, Dad, it's so I can go to Harding College." And then he would jokingly say, "Well, what do you think I'll do with this money if you decide not to go or you drop out?" And I said, "Well, you say that you and Mom are going to have the greatest vacation any couple ever had." And so this was an ongoing theme at our house. My sister was not particularly interested in that particular kind of training for her future. She took a different route. And so I don't know exactly, she was 7 years older than I was. I don't know exactly how they did their special time with her to plan for her future. But what happened was I finally graduated from high school in Little Rock and made my way to Harding. And it was a wonderful experience. And it was there that I met my college sweetheart, who I married my last year in college. He was away in the Navy at the time and was able to get off and come back for a wedding. And my family um, were just so proud that I had reached that goal, as many families in that day were. And I I found it was really special that I went to a private Christian university because of their academic requirements. I had to take a Bible course, college level study in biblical studies, um, every semester I was there, and I was there for 8 semesters. And so I graduated with 21 hours of biblical studies. Uh, and that has really been very important to me because I love teaching and I love teaching Sunday school classes. And that was the equivalent, actually, of having a minor in Bible studies. My main study was education, and I was a teacher for 24 years. And I'm so thankful that I grew up in a home that was peaceful, that was Christ centered, and focused on being sure that I grew up with some balance in my life.
Great. So then, as you became an adult, where did love show up for you, and how did that impact your relationship with the Lord?
Okay. Um, this was a really tough time in my life, but I look back on it now and it was one of the most beautiful times. I married my college sweetheart, Wayne Craig. We had grown up in the same church, I mean, the same name over the door. And he in Ohio, and I was here in Arkansas. But we were so perfectly matched. I learned what it meant to be equally yoked through that marriage. But we were married, and it was a great love. We just, people looked at us and said, "Oh, you have one of those marriages made in heaven." And I wouldn't make that claim quite. It wasn't perfect. But we used to say, well, our marriage isn't perfect, but it's been perfected through the love of Christ. And so we learned how to do things for one another. Especially, we learned how to forgive and how to go on with our love. Both being teachers, we had kids in our house all the time. And we learned how to love children, although the Lord didn't give us our very own children. There were teenagers in His work and younger kids in my work, and we loved them dearly. And one of the most wonderful things was that we learned to receive love because our students loved us. And that was very important to us. And so we're rocking along, doing all the things that young couples do, and suddenly he becomes very ill. And so it took a long time to find out what was wrong with him, and he was finally diagnosed with a liver condition, sclerosing cholangitis. It came from an earlier diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And one of the rare side effects was that it would destroy the bile ducts uh, on the liver, and that happened to him, and he became very, very ill. And he was sick for several years before the possibility of a liver transplant came along. And so that was another experience we went through, and we just felt so loved by God because He offered us one of the newest treatments that was available for people with liver diseases. And so we went through the liver transplant experience, and that was a growing experience because we witnessed to people in the hospital, and sometimes they witnessed to us. I've seen doctors take the biopsy needle, which is quite large, hold it up in the air and say, "In the name of God," and then stick it in my husband's side. So we met people of all kinds of faith there. One important thing we found was we found where the little stumbling blocks were in our faith, where what we had learned and thought was all there was wasn't all there was. When you are in a road where you're actually trying to drive your car over those bumps and you find out where the bumps are and what they're associated with, we began to look more seriously at our Bible readings and the teachings we've been through. And we began to allow God to teach us anew His Word, because we were having to depend on it for life itself, which had not been true earlier. And there are some really important things I learned. And today, I don't have the memory I used to have, so I have these notes. And one of the things that we learned was that it isn't so important that you become successful in life. It isn't for you to worry about being a failure in life, but it's important to not become successful at things that don't even matter. And so we began to distinguish between what had eternal value and what did not. And this helped us to receive God's grace and understand it in ways we had never had to understand it before. Um, and so he lived for 2.5 years with his new liver. We did all the talk shows um, in the Little Rock area on television. They allowed us to witness there, and we made some public appearances and things like that, and we spoke at seminars and things. So it was a wonderful time. And then quite suddenly, he developed a particular cancer that is caused by the drug cyclosporin, and within a month he was gone. And so now I'm on my own, and that takes us to another part of my faith growth.
Yeah. So, after Wayne passed
Uh-huh.
and you're in a new phase of life, but
Yeah.
the Lord is still with you, where do you see love showing up in your life there?
Well, being just immensely loved by the people of our church. We went to a city church in Little Rock, in Memphis. And I recall that as I was recovering that first month after he died, um, a body cannot and a mind cannot really take on the idea that a person is suddenly gone. And I remember getting up in the morning and I would pick up his picture off the dresser and I would sit and look at it and I would wonder, where are you? What are you doing now? And where is God in all of this? We thought God was saving his life when we got the transplant, and the insurance and everything all worked out so wonderfully. So I began to sit in a chair after the mail came in. And first I'd get like 30 cards a day. And then 2 days later, it would dwindle down to 20. And then maybe 15 or 20. And I remember the first day that I did not receive a sympathy card. And all of a sudden, instead of feeling down about that, I realized all the love from all of those people had filled so much of the emptiness in my life that I didn't need a card that day. And I remember just being blown away with that, because it was such a wonderful thing. And so that's also when another love um, came into my life. My second husband was also widowed, and we married during that time. And it also was a wonderful marriage, but we were not as equally yoked because we had not grown up exactly the same. And he was a little older than I was. And so uh, a lot of doors opened. I think when we're left alone, other people see the need to help us open new doors in our life. And so I found new ways to do volunteer work. Um, I spoke and volunteered at a group for younger widowed persons. And so the love that my family at church had given to me to help me recover, and in my one-on-one relationship with God, the love He gave me, and I saw myself healing, then I was able to pass that love on to others. And that was so fulfilling to me. I learned a lot about what I could mean to other people through love. And that kind of summarizes that part of my life.
Okay. And then uh, moving on from that phase of life, um, tell us a little bit about what love looks like in your life today
Okay.
and with the Lord.
My second husband also died, well, very suddenly and very unexpectedly. So here I am alone again. First of all, I'm not happy being alone. I'm a little bit of a whiner. And so I have complained about that a lot. And I have talked to God about that a lot. Um, all my girlfriends, my closest girlfriends, still have the husbands they met at Harding when I met my first husband. So, Lord, why did you have to take two away from me? Plus, you didn't give us the children we wanted. So, I'm pretty good at having little pity parties, but I really did love my husband, Joe. We had several years together, and the most loving thing I experienced, believe it or not, came through a divorce. My husband did not divorce me, I divorced him. He was a very good man. He had some habits in his life that I was so uncomfortable with. I just had to get away from it, I felt. And so I begged him for a divorce. It took a long time. He finally agreed. We were divorced for about 8 years and had almost nothing to do with each other during that time. And then I began to have this nudge in my life that uh, I needed to contact him. And so one day I thought, this keeps coming to my mind and my heart so much. Maybe this is God's Spirit talking to me, and maybe I better pay attention. And so I picked up the telephone one day and I texted him these words: Have you ever considered reconciliation? And that's all I said. And I hung up, and it was hours before I heard from him. And I thought, oh, he didn't like that. And so finally I heard from him, and he said, that's not going to work because you have a new life and a new church. I have a new life and a new church, and we're both happy the way we are. And he said, exactly what did you have in mind anyway? And so feeling a little bit of a smart attitude, I thought to myself, I didn't say it out loud. Well, don't ask me. This isn't my idea. This is God's idea. And so I said, well, if you think we could never be a couple again, how about if we became friends? And so we did become friends. And because this originated from the Holy Spirit speaking to me and not giving up on me, speaking to me over and over again, he and I, long distance, he was in Ohio, I was here in Arkansas. Um, I don't know why, but we began to talk to each other at 3 o'clock every morning. He would call me and we'd both be awake and we would talk for an hour and we just fell in love again. I mean, it was from our God. It was really. I don't think the two of us could ever have accomplished that. And so we decided to meet just before Christmas and see each other eye to eye. And we hadn't been together 24 hours before. Um, it wasn't that he proposed to me again, it was that we both proposed to each other at the same time. And the next morning, we went out and bought our rings. Um, this was so wonderful, and we were both so happy. And 36 days after the wedding, he died suddenly. This threw me for a loop, and I thought, God, what's this about? This was your idea that we get back together. You accomplished this for us. Of course, I'll never have the answer to that, except that in a human experience, especially a human love for another, I was able to understand what a blessing it was that before he died, we were able to get back together and bring our relationship full cycle. And I'd never seen Joe happier than he was during that time. He was truly a different man when he came back. And I hope he saw in me also that I had grown and changed a lot. Um, there are some scriptures that I think have a lot to do with my life now. And I'll tell you about where I'm going next. But first, I would like to draw our attention to the teaching in Colossians, where we are taught that we needed to bear with one another, forgive one another, to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And of course, I'd heard these teachings and had taught them myself in ladies' Bible studies. But the verse following that, I don't think I've ever heard a lot of it until recently. We seemed, when I was younger, our teaching about that in our churches was about understanding what kindness was, what patience was, and the other virtues of life that Jesus wanted us to have. But this is the important part. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. And I think through the loss of both husbands, I learned that I could still be a gracious, loving person. And by doing that, my life would come together in a unity with Christ that was absolutely essential. And there are verses in the Bible, you've heard these before. 1 John 4, anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. And then Colossians again, above all these things, put on love that binds everything together. These are really important verses because they bring me to my now life. I am now moving on again, alone, but this time I am old. And we like to say that we're 70, 80 years young. But truly, my body is old. Many of the systems in my body no longer work well, and I have lots of specialists. I go through lots of treatments. I take an immense amount of medications in order to keep going. I know that when we look at the end of our life, a lot of that is just emotion, and emotion can change. My emotion can be different today than it was yesterday. But I have for some time really felt that I'm close to the time when God will call me home. And so I look at things very differently, and I have big decisions to make. I want to be sure that I leave this earth loving the people who have given me love, and I want them to know that I love them. I want to know anybody who has offended me that they are forgiven because of the love of Christ. And I want to accept their forgiveness if they will give it to me. Um, one of the authors I enjoy is Francis Chan, and I do not know this minister. I just know, reading about him, that he is an evangelical preacher. He's very vivacious, and he likes to say, taking the words from another minister we all know, live your best life later. And I really appreciate that, because our best life will be when we walk across that boundary line between this life and the other. And so he says we should have a relentless, crazy, all powerful love. And that's what I want to leave this earth with having given that kind of love to people. William Barclay is my favorite commentary writer, although he's very liberal in his views. His views would be different on some things than those at our church where I worship. But I love this. Two things he said that really mean so much to me. Endurance is not just the ability to bear a hard thing, but to turn it into glory. And I think Jesus helps us through his love for us to bear the hard things in life. And because of love, he can turn them into glory. And we can obey and bring glory to our Lord. And the other thing, and this I'll close with, I think it's so beautiful. There are two great days in a person's life: the day we're born and the day we discover why. And I think living a life in love, receiving and giving, is the why of my life. And I just pray that I can end my life on some note of love someday. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.